Hey everyone, it's Lee Halliday and we are building the front end of our GraphQL Resume. We'll be doing it with Apollo Client and it's living within a Next.js app, and we're going to do some cool things like using Prism to highlight the actual query that we're using to fetch the data about ourselves. And this is part 2 of a short video series I'm doing, where in part 1 we built out the back end, and here we're focusing on the front end because our data is already there. For example, if we were to pop over to API/GraphQL, we access the GraphQL playground where we can execute the very same query. So we're querying, this is just the name of the query, but we're asking the backend to give us all of this bio information and then information about some of the past jobs that I've entered into the backend. So if I were to hit query, we get the data back and we have all of the positions. So this is what we're going to end up with in this video, and let's get started. Thanks again to AppSignal for partnering with me on this video. They just announced on their blog that they can now automatically instrument Apollo for Node.js applications. So head on over, check that out. And I wanted to talk about one of my favorite features, and that's the performance issues list. Here's where you can find the endpoints that are having the largest negative impact on your users. So impact means that there's a lot of throughput, but it's slow to respond. So clicking in, you can get a breakdown of where things are going slowly. Is it in GraphQL? Is it making too many requests to Redis? Or maybe too many queries to the database? And then down below, you can drill into what the actual details of this request are. If you'd like to use AppSignal, it is free for 1 month, and if you use the coupon code LEIGH, L-E-I-G-H, you'll get 10% off for your first year. Thanks again to AppSignal, and let's get back to this tutorial. It's time to build out the Apollo client. I just wanted to show the packages that we're using. On the front end, we're using Apollo Client, DateFNS to do some date formatting, GraphQL because we're going to be formatting our GraphQL query later on in Prism, and then React Syntax Highlighter, which is a way we can bring Prism into our React app. So let's start this up with yarn dev, and then hop over to localhost 3000, and we see this beautiful resume. So that comes from the index page because we don't have anything in our URL. So if we were to go over to the index page, this is what we've got going on. We've got, we're exporting a default function component called home, and it's showing the head. So this comes from next head, and it's how you control all of the title and favicon and stuff you want to change within the head part of the HTML document. And then we just have resume here. So there's not much going on, but what we are going to actually do is focus on this underscore app. So this is actually sort of a special component that comes with Next.js that's sort of the wrapper around every single page that your front end is going to have. So it's a very simple sort of functional component that takes in this thing called component. That's the page that you're on, and also any props that that page is receiving, and it basically returns that page. But what this allows us to do is basically wrap the Apollo provider around this so that we can have that available on every single page. So why don't we start by importing that? So that would be import Apollo provider from Apollo client. And then what we can do is wrap that around our component. So wrap that around this. So what you need to do is provide a client to this Apollo provider. So we'll say client equals client, but obviously this doesn't exist yet. So we need to set that up here. And we're going to say client is equal to use Apollo. So this is a hook that we are going to create. And basically that will initialize our Apollo client, and then this Apollo provider will provide that to every single page of our application. So why don't we import this non-existent function from a non-existent file that we are about to create. So we'll import use Apollo from src, let's just call it Apollo client, like that. And I'm going to switch this over to TypeScript so that we start to get some errors about this. TSX. So this should be telling us, yep, it does not exist. And since we're at it, why don't we also pop this home page over to TypeScript? Oh boy, not delete. Pop this over to TypeScript as well, so it can tell us if anything's wrong. I think it's good. Yep. Okay, so inside of SRC, we are going to create the Apollo client.typescript. And here's where we'll have to initialize our actual Apollo client. So why don't we just start with our import script at the top. It's going to be coming from Apollo client. And the things that we are going to need are in-memory cache. So Apollo manages its own cache, and you get to decide where you want to store it. We're just going to store it in memory. And next we need the Apollo client itself that we are going to create a new instance of. We need HTTP link. This is how Apollo basically goes to our backend and requests data. And then the last thing, we just need this normalized cache object to make TypeScript happy. So we're going to be working with an instance of the Apollo client. And we're going to basically just create it as a let, because we're going to start it out as, I guess, undefined. And then within our hook, we're going to create an instance of that. And the reason we would do that is because on subsequent sort of browsing around our website, we can reuse the same Apollo client and not have to sort of reinitialize it. And the reason we'd want to do that is because we can take advantage of the in-memory cache from one page to the next. So to define our TypeScript, this is an instance of the Apollo client, and you need to pass sort of what type of cache you're going to be using. And this just allows us to say sort of any type of cache object that Apollo supports. So if you remember in our _app, the special component that allows us to wrap every single page, we imported useApollo, and it returned us the client. So that's what we have to define here. So we'll just say export function useApollo. And this will be in charge of sort of returning the Apollo client sort of thing. But I actually want to wrap this in a function called initialize Apollo. So this will return initialize Apollo like that. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm actually basing the setup off of this from the very great Next.js examples that they have. So they have one that shows you how to set up Apollo server and client. And if you click in here, you sort of get the finished version. It's not in TypeScript, so I'm doing that a little bit differently. But this one sets up Apollo client for both client only and server-side rendering or server-side generation. We're just going to be focusing on the simpler one, just client only. But I'm going to do a follow-up video that walks through the entire sort of SSR and client only Apollo setup. So stay tuned for that a little bit after this video. So in here, we'll be creating this function initialize Apollo like that. And what we want to do in here is basically first check to see if we have an instance that already exists of the Apollo client. And we can use that by actually just saying Apollo client equals, and we can take advantage of this thing. I think it's called nullish coalescing or something like that. I don't know. It's the question mark operator. I should look up what that is, and I'll link to it in the description below. But what this allows us to do is basically say, check if there's an Apollo client. But if there's not, sort of if this is nullish or undefined or anything like that, then take the right side of this operator, and we are going to create a new instance of the Apollo client. So right here, we would just return the Apollo client, but we're obviously getting an error that this Apollo client function doesn't exist. So what we can do is just create another function and call it create Apollo client like this. And this is where we will just be returning a new instance of the Apollo client. So when you're setting up an Apollo client, you have to pass it a bunch of options. Otherwise, it won't exist. It won't exist. It won't allow you to create an instance of it, in which case it wouldn't exist. But what it wants is always a link. So this is basically how it should go and fetch the data from the backend. So we'll be using the HTTP link, and that's a new instance of it. And you also have to pass some options to this. For example, where on the internet does your GraphQL API exist? Ours within this Next.js application lives at /API/GraphQL. And, it doesn't like it because I renamed the _app file. So we'll just restart our app, load this again, and if you load this in the browser, you get the playground, but this is actually where our GraphQL API exists here as well. So in the URI, we want to basically just say, go and find this at API/GraphQL. So that's the link. And the other thing that we need to do is to set up the cache. What cache is the Apollo client to use? So we said we were going to use the in-memory cache, so we'll just create a new instance of that. And you can see that TypeScript is happy once we've provided both a link and a cache to our Apollo client. So with that in place, it's sort of convoluted to get to here, but when we call useApollo from our special _app component, that will initialize Apollo. And initialize Apollo will either take the existing version of it or it will create a new version of it. And when it's creating a new version of it, it will be returning an instance of the Apollo client that has both an HTTP link and a cache so that it can keep track of what queries it's run, so it doesn't have to refetch them if it already has them. So with this setup, we have a client that is passed to the Apollo provider. And because our Apollo provider wraps every single page within our application, we can actually go into that page now and we can import from Apollo client a hook called useQuery. And we're also going to need GQL. And what these allow us to do is basically perform queries against our GraphQL API using this hook here. But in order to perform the query, we need to first define what query we're going to run. So we will call this the resume query, and it will be equal to GQL. And then within here, we can define our query. So we could just pop over here and copy this whole thing that we've already run. Cool. So our resume query, what is it? It's a query that we could give it the same name, resume query, that asks for all of these fields. And with that query defined, we can go down and say, we want to use the query, the resume query. And what this will give us back are a few things. It will give us the data. It will give us if there's an error that our GraphQL API returned. And it will also give us a Boolean of whether or not it's still loading data. So what we can do here is we can say, if it's loading, let's return, what do I want to do here? Why don't we wrap it in a proper if statement? So if loading, return, and in here we could return, why don't we return a header that just says something like, Lee Halliday. I want to call myself what sort of developer? Full stack developer. And then we can just say, actually, why don't we just say here, loading ... So when it's loading, it is going to return a header tag that says Lee Halliday loading, like that. And because I have already defined some of the classes we're going to be using in this, I've got one for the header here that basically just aligns the text, adds some padding, and sets a background color. So if we were to use that class on this header, class name is equal to styles.header, we should get a styled header. So error handling, yes, you should probably handle error handling So why don't we just say, if there's an error, return a span that says error, oops. So you would obviously want a better error message than this, especially if it's a resume that you're sending out to employees. Imagine they load the page and it just says error, oops. That would be probably not getting the job. But if there's no error and there's no loading state still, that means by the time we get to this point, we have data that we can display. So for now, why don't we just put inside of a pre-tag the JSON.stringified version of the data so that we can see what the server is sending back to us. So if we go back to the browser, head back to the home page, what we get is, once this thing finally loads, okay, we actually do have an error, which is sort of funny. Let's try to figure out what this error is. So network, why don't we filter down to GraphQL? What doesn't it like? Cannot query field location on position. So for some reason, it cannot query location on position. That is a very good question of why it can't. Maybe I didn't define it. That would be funny. So let me just do a bit of troubleshooting on the back end. So we go into our GraphQL. Inside of our back end, we've got a schema which comes from here. Inside of our schema, we have all of the types. And on the position type, we should have one called location that doesn't exist. So that's why. So I'm just going to add it because I do have data for the location. I believe each one of these has a location. Yes. So I think eventually this will fix itself once the TypeScripts sort of redefine themselves. It's all automatic in the back end. But if we were to refresh this now, cool. So we get loading state for a second. You could see it's very quick. Why don't we make it slower just so we can see it for longer? We can't because it's, I was going to add a timeout just to make it slower, but for a second you see Lee Halliday loading and then we get all of the data back from our backend. So this is our next task to basically take this data and render it in React. So let's pop back to our homepage, and here we already have the data that we were showing with JSON stringify. Just a little tip, if you say null as the replacer and 2 as the spacing, you come back and it actually formats it really nicely with indentation and whatnot. So this is the data that we're working with in a bit nicer way to view it. So we have two main sections, our bio and our positions. So why don't we actually just pop those into two variables equals data. And then what we can do is start with our header. So we already have one sort of started up here for our loading state. So I'm going to come down and instead of doing it with just hard-coded, now we can actually do bio.name. And instead of loading, we can do bio. And I believe it was the tagline, full stack developer. No, tagline. Just like that. And we have to close this little bracket here. So if we were to pop back here, we now have our header showing up. And below this, what I'm going to do is basically have two divs, one over here on the left and one over here on the right that uses Flexbox to control them. So what I'm going to do is set up that Flexbox container. So we're going to give it a div, and we need to give it the class name styles dot, what's it called? Split. That's my nice class name that sets up display flex. Just like that. Split like this. And then inside of here, we are going to have a left, which will have a class name of styles.left, and a right, which will be class name of styles.right. So if we were to come back, we now have this left section over here and then right over here. And I'm just keeping this data below because it's nice to reference as we're sort of building this out. So on our left side, we are going to basically have, that's where our overview section sort of exists. So we are going to have different things like what's the way to contact me, what's my website, what's my LinkedIn, etc. So why don't we just call that contact? And then below here, we'll do a P for each one. And then inside of the P, we will do a strong that has email. And then below or beside that, we will do a link to the actual email address. So we'll do href, and in here we will do bio.email. And because we want to allow them to click it easily, we can do backticks and do mail to, and then embed the bio.email in here. So with that in place, we have this contact here. We're missing the space because React is like that. You got to add that little space. It adds it automatically with Prettier. If you were to save it, it just pops that in here. But now we have email contact like that. So I'm just going to do a little bit of copy paste to add one for website, GitHub, and LinkedIn. So the next one down will be website, and this will just be bio.website. And in here, we'll just start by putting in the whole bio.website. So just like that. So if you didn't want the whole sort of thing displaying, https:// with a trailing slash, one little hack you can do to fix the display portion of that is you can actually do it as a URL, which basically parses it all out and gets the protocol and the path and the host and all of that. And what we actually just want is the host. So that's one way to sort of get it just looking nice like this, www.leehalliday.com. But if you were to click this, it would take you to the full website. So after that, we've got, I wanted to do LinkedIn, I believe. Actually, no, let's do GitHub because we're developers. So this will be GitHub. We'll pop in bio.github here. So we could do the whole URL thing again, but the problem with that is the host would just be github.com. What I actually just want to do is make this a little bit shorter. So I want it to just be like github.com/LeeHalliday, because I think that would make it look a little bit shorter. So what we can do to get around that is by using our friend replace. So we can just look for https:// and replace that with an empty string. So if we were to come back now, we get this nice short github.com/LeeHalliday, where when you click that, it takes you to the correct page. So we're going to do the exact same for LinkedIn here. LinkedIn will take us to bio.linkedin, and then we will do this LinkedIn.replace https:// replace that with an empty string. Perfect. So linkedin.com/in/LeeHalliday pops you over to my LinkedIn page. So we've got our left sort of contact section set up. Later, we will add this highlighted query that we're going to do using Prism. But let's focus on the right side to just get that built out. So we'll pop over to the right side. And the first thing I wanted to do is just mention the objective. Like every resume typically has an objective. Why the heck are you actually applying for this job? So that was stored in bio.objective. Save that to build the greatest YouTube tutorials. That's right. And then below this, we can have the past positions that I've had. So this would be my experience. And then below here is where we're going to be looping through each of the positions that I've had. So I've already popped positions into this variable here. So what we can do is positions.map. We're going to iterate over each position. And inside of here, I am going to do something like this, where we will return. So what are we going to return? we're going to return an li. No, I'm not going to put each one inside of a UL, I don't think, because I don't want to worry about styling each one. So we'll just put each one inside of a div like this. So for now, let's just say the word position. Let's give it a key so that it doesn't complain. And there we go. So here's my 5 positions showing up. Next, we just have to go through the effort of getting it to display the actual data that we want. So why don't we start off with an H3, because we're sort of nested within an H2 here, and this will have the title that I held at this position. So position.title, and I believe here there's actually a style that we can give to this, styles.position. Let's see what it does. Nope, you know what, there isn't, so let's not even include that. So below the title, we are going to put a P, and this P will have what company it's at and the location that that company exists at. So position.company, we'll do a pipe, and then position.location. So there we go. Flip gives in Toronto. Arcus was in New York. The score was in Toronto. So that's showing up. And I wanted to make this a little bit lighter. So I had a style over here called light that basically just turns it a little bit smaller, and it gives it a color here. So for this P, we will give a class name of styles.light. And let's just go right into the P below that. So in the P below that, we are going to put sort of when I worked there. So we'll start that off by the position.startDate and to the position.endDate. So you'll see something a little bit ugly as soon as I do that. First of all, you probably don't want to show your date like this. And what happens if you're still working there? So there's no end date. So here it works well, but here it doesn't. So we need to handle those 2 different use cases. So we can handle the current job by saying, first check if there's an end date. And if not, just say current, like that. So now we have this date to current. And now why don't we focus on getting the date formatted? So for that, I can import something from date FNS. And I believe the thing that I want to use is called format, which makes sense. Cool. So we come down here to format the date. So format is here. And it wants to receive as an actual date as its first parameter. But this start date is actually a string. So we need to first give it a new instance of date. And then we can tell it how to format the date. So it is formatted, I think it's YYYY MMM. No, use lowercase YYY instead of uppercase YYY. Okay. Let's see if that works. That's right, but my month was wrong. Hold on, I have it written down somewhere here. It is big triple M. And I actually wanted it before the date, like that. Cool, so from October 2019 to current, from April 2019 to that date. So now we can go back and we can fill in the exact same thing for end date. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this. But remember, we want it only here when there is an end date. End date like that. What did I do wrong? I have to wrap this in format. Like, oh man. You know what? Sometimes it's just easier to type the thing, no? Format is a new date with a format of MMM close format. There we go. So now, if I refresh, we're formatting the end date. So now we have April to October, February to this date. So one cool thing that the backend is providing us is how many years and months that you've worked at this place. So 2 years, 2 months at this position, 1 year exactly here, 5 months here. So what I wanted to do is just beside this to say something like 2 years space 2 months, something like this. But the thing is, there aren't always years and there aren't always months. So you sort of have to figure out which of this combo that you have. And I'm going to actually put this in a variable called length. So inside of the map for each one, we can say the length is equal to, and here's a little bit of a trick that I like to do, is basically use a ternary to figure out if you have each one. So if position.years is greater than 0, if that's true, we will say position.years space YRS, otherwise we'll just do null. And then we'll do the same thing for months. So months is greater than 0. If that's true, we will say position.months and then MTHS or null. So now you end up with an array that has 2 elements where either one could be null. So what you can do is you can do filter to filter out each string where you're basically just checking if it has some sort of value, because filter will filter out any ones that have null. So you'll end up with only the ones that have values, and then you can join them with a space. So by doing that, we now have, so it didn't work for this one. Why? Oh, that's why. Cool. So 9 months, 6 months, and why don't we make it look a little bit better by putting this inside of brackets. So just like that. Cool. So now we have October 2019 to current is 9 months, but at this position it was 2 years, 2 months. So that's looking good. The next thing that I wanted to do is just to show the different achievements or sort of tasks that I've done at each job. So we will do that inside of an unordered list, and we will iterate over the position.achievements. So that will give us the achievement. And for that, we will return an li. We need a key. This is just an array of strings. There isn't an actual ID on this, but hopefully each achievement's different. So I'm actually just going to use the text of the achievement for the key. And then in here, we will just show the achievement like this. Position.achievements is not a function. Why is it not? Let's comment out that for a sec. Look at the data we're getting back. Position.achievement. Oh, I know why. I'm an idiot. You have to map the achievements. You can't just, yeah, that's it. There we go. So now, basically, we've built out the look of the resume. We've got our objective, our experience, what the title was, where it was, and what company, how long we were there. We could make this a light color as well, just by adding in that class name of light to that. There we go. And then we've got our different achievements that we did at each of those positions. So the last thing I want to do is basically fill in this section here where we show a formatted GraphQL query using Prism that does the code formatting. So we're basically going to take this query here and display it nicely as part of our resume. To get the code highlighting working, we first need to add a few different imports that we need. So we will be importing something from React Syntax Highlighter. So they allow you to use a few different highlighters. You can use one called HLJS and another one called Prism. We're going to use Prism, but we'll just give it an alias of Syntax Highlighter so that's a little bit more explicit about what's going on. And with Prism, you need to tell it what style to use because they have a whole bunch that you can choose from. So we're going to import something called Prism style from, and it comes from React Syntax Highlighter, and then you can just slash into. First you want to slash into styles, then you can choose which one you're using. So Prism slash, and these are all the ones that you get to choose from. So why don't we try, I don't know, funky, and then we'll switch it up later. So with this in place, we can come down and use this syntax highlighter. So let's put this right below on the left-hand panel right here. So put this here, and inside of here, we will put just a little bit of GraphQL. So query our bio name like that. So we need to tell it what language we're going to be using, GraphQL, and what style to use. So that was Prism style, like this. So if we were to go back to the web, refresh the page, we now get this thing displaying here with this sort of ridiculous styling going on. And let's switch up whatever style we're using. Instead of funky, why don't we use, I don't know how to pronounce that, Shonokai, I guess. So for me, that's looking a little bit better here, but I want our actual query. So you'd think it would be really awesome if you could just pop the result of this GQL and paste it in as sort of what's being rendered here. But what you'll see in a second is that stir.match is not a function, which isn't super helpful. But the reason is that the type of data returned by GQL isn't a string. It's actually a type of data called a document node. So there's a way to sort of access the string within that document node, but there's actually an easier way I discovered, where if you import something called print from GraphQL/language/printer, this print function takes this document node and actually formats it really nicely and gives it to you as a string. So we just need to wrap print around our resume query document node, and voila, we get our query that we use to build out this resume front end showing up nicely syntax highlighted over here on the left. And with that, that is the end of the video. We took our previously built GraphQL backend that's built within the same Next.js app using Nexus schema, using Apollo server, and we basically built out the front end of that. First, by within this special app component, by setting up the Apollo provider, we built this use Apollo hook, I guess you could say, that returns our client. And then within our actual page itself, we were able to then use things like useQuery that come from Apollo client. And that works because this page is nested within the Apollo provider here. Hope you enjoyed the video. I would love if anyone's following along and they end up building their own GraphQL resume to share that with me and switch up the styling, make it your own, add different data, etc. Hope you enjoyed this. Take care. Bye.